Jake sprinted through the crowded subway station. His backpack, heavy with spray cans, thumped against his back. He could hear the pounding footsteps of the station inspector hot on his tail. Jake pushed past commuters, his heart pounding like a drum solo. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The inspector, a burly man with a handlebar mustache, was gaining on him. Jake ducked under a turnstile, narrowly avoiding a collision. He had to lose the inspector. Fast. Weaving through the throng of people, Jake spotted a sign for Platform 4. He veered right, his lungs burning. The platform was relatively empty, just a few people waiting for the next train. Jake didn't hesitate. He scrambled onto the tracks, ignoring the startled gasps from the onlookers. The inspector skidded to a halt at the edge of the platform. He cursed under his breath. He couldn't follow Jake onto the tracks, not with a train due any minute. He watched in frustration as Jake disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. Jake didn't stop running. The air was thick with the smell of dust and ozone. He could hear the distant rumble of an approaching train. He had to find an escape route, and fast. Up ahead, he spotted a narrow opening, a ventilation shaft. It wasn't ideal, but it was his only option. He squeezed through the opening, scraping his arms on the rough edges. The shaft was cramped and dark, but at least he was out of sight. Jake emerged from the ventilation shaft into a dimly lit service tunnel. He was safe for now. He slumped against the cool, damp wall, catching his breath. The inspector wouldn't find him here. But Jake knew this wasn't over. The inspector was relentless. He needed a plan, a way to turn the tables. As he caught his breath, his hand brushed against the familiar cold metal of a spray can in his backpack. An idea began to form. He would use his art to strike back. He would give the inspector a taste of his own medicine. Jake rummaged through his backpack, pulling out cans of spray paint in every color imaginable. He found a smooth section of wall, free of graffiti. This would be his canvas. He would create a masterpiece, a tribute to the inspector he couldn't shake. Jake worked through the night, fueled by adrenaline and creative energy. He sketched quickly, his movements confident and fluid. The outline of the inspector emerged on the wall, complete with his handlebar mustache and stern expression. But Jake wasn't finished. He added a few humorous touches.
The inspector now sported a bright pink tutu around his waist. A flock of cartoon birds fluttered around his head, each one carrying a spray can. And beneath the portrait, in bold, playful letters, Jake wrote, "Catch me if you can."
When he was finished, Jake stepped back to admire his work. It was his masterpiece, a perfect blend of rebellion and humor. It was a message to the inspector, a challenge. Let's see how you catch me now. The next day, a rumor spread through the station. The inspector had seen Jake's mural. He was furious. He swore he would catch Jake no matter what. Jake, however, had vanished. He had moved his hideout to a rooftop overlooking the station. From his vantage point, he could see everything. He watched as the inspector paced the platform, his face a mask of frustration. Jake smiled. His plan was working. He had lured the inspector into a game of cat and mouse. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Jake knew it was time for his final act. He took a deep breath and pulled a single red rose from his bag. He attached it to a piece of string and carefully lowered it down to the platform where the inspector stood. The inspector glanced up, startled. He saw the red rose dangling before him. Attached to it was a small note. He cautiously untied it and read the message scrawled on the paper. "Thanks for the game, Inspector. Better luck next time."
The inspector crumpled the note in his fist, his face turning red with anger. He looked up to the rooftop, but Jake was gone. The inspector let out a roar of frustration. He had been outsmarted by a kid with a spray can.
As he stormed off, the inspector failed to notice a single red rose tucked behind his ear. A final, playful gesture from the elusive artist who had painted the town red. Jake had escaped, leaving his mark on the city and the inspector's memory. The chase was over, but the game had just begun.